one thing that fascinated us, and we had discovered in an early paper, our first major paper in this area was in 2003, was this notion, Carmen said, of serial default. Everybody thinks this is a Latin American phenomenon or a couple countries in Central Europe. It's actually nearly universal. Virtually every country, when they're going through the emerging market stage, which usually is 200 or 300 years, defaults periodically, not every year. Venezuela is the modern day record holder, but they still default, roughly every 20 years. But France back then was every 30 years, up to 1800. But it's maybe every 50 years for some countries. It's a fairly frequent event. We learned over time that this is something countries graduate from, but something we learned in the book that sort of surprised us was that rich countries do not graduate from banking crises. So even before this, we had written a paper, we had a chapter in our book showing that, well, you know what, government default on government debt, yes, that happens in emerging markets, not so often in rich countries, not banking crises. And then we were able to show that they're quantitatively not that different. There's a whole stories about the years of collecting the data, but I'll just give you a few highlights of it. I know you probably don't think collecting data could have any highlights, but one of the things that we realized was really important to have was housing price data, which was not easily available. I called Robert Schiller and asked, where can I get housing price for the whole world? And he said, there's not. You can get it for a few years, but we need to go back a ways so we can look around the time of these crises. And we found a paper by someone at the Federal Reserve that cited confidential data at the Bank for International Settlements, and managed to get the name of that person. And we wrote to them, not really thinking we'd get the data. And he sent us the data, and he said, you know what, this is my last day at work. And this data is not supposed to be public, but somebody ought to have it. And he sent it to us. And, and we since got emerging market data and a number of others to supplement that. And then I'd say the one which you almost can't explain to somebody who's not in the field is just plain vanilla government debt data. You say, oh, wait a second, the IMF keeps that, the World Bank keeps that. No, believe me, they don't. We were there. In fact, we took great pains to get it for a small number of countries going back 10 years, much less what we have in our data sets now 100 years. Why do you want to know that? Well, is the U.S. have too much debt when it's 60%, 80%? When do countries default? The debt data you can get is what you owe to foreigners. But there's a lot of other debt that you owe to your own citizens, pension funds, rich individuals. In fact, it's one thing we discovered, it's the same order of magnitude.